College football has crowned a national champion, but the business of the BCS remains anything but settled. An insider tells us what's ahead.
It will be, when it comes to revenue anyway, it will be contentious.
After months of talk, the NHL is back in action.
We have reached an agreement.
So what's been gained from all the pain?
I really think both sides really gave in.
Plus, why do sponsors love the letters MMA?
It's not just a single sport, it's a combination of sports, and that's what young guys want to see.
And Barry Bonds set records and drew crowds in San Francisco. So does his former boss think he belongs in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm going to dodge the question.
Tough questions and bottom line answers. Straight ahead on Sportfolio. Hello, I'm Rick Horrow, and welcome to Sportfolio, Bloomberg's weekly inside look at the business of sports. The college football season ended with a thud Monday night in Miami as Alabama crushed Notre Dame in a one-sided BCS title game. It was an excellent argument for the new playoff system that's coming in 2014. Fans may get better championship matchups if the berths are determined on the field and not by computer. And, of course, more games that count mean more revenue opportunities. Conference commissioners, athletic directors, and network officials are busy figuring out how the system will work and how it'll shake out financially. Joining us to discuss the shifting business landscape of college sports, Joe Bailey. He heads the Global Sport Leadership Consulting Practice for RSR Partners. He also served as interim commissioner of the Big East Conference from May through August of last year. Hey, Joe, Alabama-Notre Dame was a sellout, but overall bowl attendance was down for the second straight year. Is there a push to rethink the whole bowl structure going into 2014?
Well, I think that's probably left up to the people that are totally involved in that. I think that like everything in business and everything in sports, things tend to evolve. As we know, growing up, we had a limited number of bowls, and now we have many, many more bowls. But ultimately, you want to have bowls be a fabulous experience for not only the participants, for everybody that is there that enjoys the games. And if you don't have a full capacity bowl, then it disappoints everybody. So it would be a concern of mine and concern of those that are governing the bowl series that they are not drawing as well as they should be.
I personally want to bring back the Pool on Weed Eater Independence Bowl, but that's for another day. ESPN kicked in $5.6 billion over 12 years for TV rights to the championship playoff. We'd heard the distribution of this money will vastly favor those power conferences. Well, good for them, but is it good for the business?
Well, I was part of the BCS discussions as one of the conference commissioners during the course of the summer, and I can tell you that the economics with regards to the revenue distribution were going to be left to the very last topic of the 4 or 5 major topics. And my guess is while they have been focused in on television and on the site selection, et cetera, that they haven't made that determination just yet. But it will be, at the end, like everything, it will be, when it comes to revenue anyway, it will be contentious. But it should, candidly, benefit all of collegiate sport, and particularly football. I think football itself is not necessarily a growing sport, and that concerns because the participation in football across the United States is declining. It's not increasing. So anything that the people who have an influence can do to support the grassroots participation of football going forward would be beneficial to everybody.
The Big East, though, arguably the biggest loser in all this change, Commissioner Mike Oresco, he hadn't been able to keep the conference together. How much of this chaos did you see coming?
Well, candidly, I didn't anticipate it. When I got there, my role as the acting commissioner was to reframe, refocus, and re-energize the conference. And we had 6 different initiatives, all of which we had accomplished. I thought that for a whole variety of reasons, the window was going to be opened as far as our media contract was concerned. We would be able to get a substantial media package, and that would create the stickiness to have all of the schools remain. It was very clear that the conference itself had changed radically. In unintended consequences of schools leaving was that there was an addition to a number of schools, and it made it a national conference, which ultimately made it very appealing from a television perspective. So I honestly didn't anticipate the defection, particularly of Notre Dame. I thought for a variety of reasons, Father Jenkins and others felt very strongly about keeping Notre Dame in the Big East in terms of their Olympic sports, and we made a tremendous amount of progress in making sure that Boise State and SMU and Houston and San Diego State remained as well. So I did not anticipate it at all, and of course it's like anything else. When when new things happen, new innovations happen, that causes disruptions, and you clearly have seen it in the Big East, and now I really didn't anticipate the Catholic schools leaving as well.
Well, let's talk about those Catholic schools. So our new mantra is these big TV contracts increase stickiness in some ways, but what is unstuck are those 7 Big East Catholic schools that don't have FBS football, and they're leaving to form that new conference. An ESPN report this week claims Fox is planning to bid aggressively on the TV rights for this league. Perhaps $40 million a year. Could there be a bidding war for this property in your estimation?
Well, I imagine anytime you have two entities that desire a property, then you're ultimately the beneficiary is going to be the property itself. So for a whole variety of reasons, I hope that not only are the economics good for the individual schools, but also the distribution of the content and the exposure of the schools themselves. Certainly revenue is very important as far as schools are concerned, but it's the quality of play, it's the quality of coaching, it's the quality of the experience that the students have and the communities have, because these schools in essence are individual communities. They're all they have their own ecosystem, and clearly sports creates that stickiness for all the alumni, which is very important as far as the institutions are concerned. I know candidly that intercollegiate athletics, really the big issue ultimately is governance, and how these boards of these individual institutions are aware of how making the decisions for these individual institutions to switch from one conference to the other is something that's going to be beneficial, and are the boards kept informed of this? Governance alignment is enormously important from a business perspective, from any kind of enterprise, and it certainly is from an institution as well.
We have a chance to assess the business history of that conference, but what's the bottom line? The lesson can be taken from the Big East debacle. What have we learned?
You've learned a couple of different things, that there's a continual shift and sea change within intercollegiate sport that maybe still hasn't been finalized just yet. I think that institutions, because of the economic demands on them, they really have to walk a fine line between making sure that their athletic programs are well funded, but also that they are not perceived as being driven totally by the dollars. What's the difference between institutions, educational institutions, and business is that they're in the business of education, and it's very different from a professional model when they're in the business to quote-unquote win. So whether it's the playoffs, which ultimately crown a national champion, do they in fact denigrate all the other people that play football and play in these bowls and compete on a week-to-week basis? Remains to be seen. Crowning a national champion is very beneficial as far as the team is concerned, as far as the school is concerned, but does it benefit all of the stakeholders? And I think at the end of the day, what we really need is leadership from the chairs of the boards of trustees, which is aligned with the presidents, and in turn aligned with the mission of the athletic departments.
Joe Bailey, as always, appreciate your insights and your candor. Thanks for joining us on Sportfolio.
Thank you.
Coming up, ladies and gentlemen, we have hockey. The NHL lockout over, but at what price to the game? Agent Tom Laidlaw helps us break down the deal. Plus, a sport that's winning an audience worth fighting for, and baseball's controversial Hall of Fame vote. All straight ahead on Sportfolio. Welcome back to Sportfolio. At the start of the NHL lockout way back in September, I asked NHL player agent Tom Laidlaw if we'd have hockey by Thanksgiving. He looked me straight in the eye and said, no chance. Unfortunately, he was dead right on that one. and we decided to have him back on the program to talk about the labor deal that saved the season in mid-January. Hey, Tom, you called it. Congratulations.
Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day, so I had to get something right there, but thank you very much.
Well, unfortunately, you were right on that one, but in the final analysis, players made concessions on the split of hockey revenue. Owners gave ground on pensions, so which side won in your estimation?
Well, I think most people thought going into the deal that it was going to be not somebody blinking or somebody giving in necessarily. It was going to be a negotiation, and I think ultimately that's what happened. It took a while to get to that point, and a lot of people credit the mediator that stepped in. But I really think both sides really gave in. Now, obviously, the players knew that there were going to be concessions they had to make. They went from 57% in their hockey-related revenues down to 50%. So, you know, they probably gave up more, but at the same time, salaries have gone up, revenues have gone up. So I think they knew that they're going to have to give in on those areas. Whoever
won or lost, the big question is, how much did hockey lose by wiping out half the season, the Winter Classic, the All-Star Game? Was the deal worth the damage to the brand?
Well, you know, anytime you've got a negotiation and you look at it and you say, okay, it was a negotiation. Why couldn't you guys have negotiated this in September as opposed to waiting to January? But, you know, people that go through it realize, I mean, there's pressure points, and until you go through the process and really have pressure on both sides, you really don't know if you're going to get to your best deal. So you don't like it. It's terrible for the fans. We've done so many great things in the sport of hockey to build the game up. You don't want to see that, and again, especially for the fans. The hope is, and I do believe that there hasn't been that much damage done. You're going to have some fans that are mad, and maybe we won't come back right away or won't spend as much money buying the jerseys and everything. But I do think that there is a bunch of loyal hockey fans, and they'll be back.
Don Fehr, former baseball guy turned hockey guy, and as a former player, how do you grade Don Fehr as a leader of the Players Association?
Well, to me, different areas. First of all, the ability to keep everybody together. When you've got hockey players from all over the world, all different ages, you know, different languages they speak, and he kept them all together. You had a few people maybe speak out a little bit that they wanted to get back to play, but you know, by nature, hockey players just want to play. I mean, all athletes, I think, are the same way. And for him to keep everybody together the way he did, as long as he did, I think that's one of the biggest things. And I think a big part of it is just, you know, the confidence level that he has in himself. He's done it so many times, the way he carries himself, the way he showed respect for the players. I think that was the biggest thing he did. Again, they knew they were going to have to give up some things. I think they did their best to give up as little as possible and get back as much as they could, but I think he did a great job.
Well, they want to play, but they also want to tweet when they're not playing, so that's part of his challenge that he navigated through. Now, grade Commissioner Bettman.
Well, you know, everybody wants to pick on Mr. Bettman, and, you know, I'm a player guy. I've played and been an agent, you know, so I'm clearly on the player side. But when I look at the job that Gary Bettman has done from when he started, I think the revenues were roughly around $600 or $700 million. It is a $3.3 billion business now. Yes, we do not want to have lockouts. We do not want to be talking about the business side of the game. We want to be talking about the game. But, you know, if I'm a player and my salary is tied to the overall revenue, which it clearly is, you got to say, well, you know, he's helped to drive salaries up. Again, people don't like him because of the job he has to do. But from a business side, I think from the owner's side and the player's side, he's done a very good job for everybody.
And let's remember also the 10-year deal with an 8-year opt-out. It does guarantee some level of stability they haven't had before. So now, only a week or so for training camps, no exhibition games. Are we going to see good hockey right out of the gate or not?
Oh, I definitely think we will. We had a lot of guys that have gone over to Europe and played. And the athletes of today, you know, in all sports, but, you know, in this sport, hockey, have really kept themselves in great shape. It may be a little bit rough to start with, but I really anticipate that, you know, you may have some early injuries, back injuries and things like that because guys aren't in, you know, total game shape. But I think when they really get going, that maybe after that first week or two of the season, you're going to see some great hockey because every game is that much more important.
Bring back the days of Tom Laidlaw on the ice. Tom Laidlaw, Laidlaw Sports. Thanks for joining us on Sportfolio.
Great to be here.
Coming up, mixed martial arts is one of the fastest growing sports in the U.S. And according to our guests, it's clobbering the competition in a very important demographic. Here's why.
It's a sport that is exciting. It delivers every single time you watch it.
And this week's Stumper is about baseball. Can you name the all-time top 3 Major League players who have earned the most money in salary? A hint. None of them is in the Hall of Fame. Answer when Sportfolio returns. Here's the answer to our Stumper. The top 3 all-time leaders in career salary earnings from Major League Baseball: Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, and Manny Ramirez. Barry Bonds ranks 4th on the list. Welcome back to Sportfolio. Between live events, pay-per-view, sales of video games, and advertising revenue, mixed martial arts generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually. This month, the second largest MMA series, Bellator Fighting Championships, moves its television address from MTV2 to Spike TV, the Viacom network specifically tailored to young male audiences. I asked Spike TV President Kevin Kay and Bellator CEO Bjorn Rebney why their product is so popular with this coveted demographic.
Well, it's a sport that has just attracted that 18 to 34-year-old male demo. I mean, it's a super consumer. It's socioeconomically impressed. It's college educated. It's young guys who spend a great deal of money. And MMA has just attached itself to that demographic in a way that we haven't seen in sports literally in the last 25 years.
How does this fit into your programming model?
Well, it's perfect because we go after 18 to 34-year-old men. And, that's our meat and potatoes, and that's where our advertisers live, and that's who they want to reach. So, MMA has been always, successful on Spike in reaching those guys.
Look at your sponsors. We got Dave & Buster's, DirecTV, U.S. Navy, Joseph Bank. If you're going after young males, this is the mother lode. How are you doing it, and what do the sponsors look like in the future?
Sponsorship response has been spectacular, and it's just growing day in and day out. I mean, the success of MMA on Spike for the last 6.5, 7 years has been just enormous, and advertisers respond to it. I mean, look, it's a young demographic, it's males, it's a sport that is exciting, it delivers every single time you watch it. That's the difference with MMA versus boxing and other combat sports. 9 out of 10 times, the fights are spectacular, and young male consumers respond to it. They respond in terms of live event, they respond in terms of television.
I'm dating myself, but we didn't used to call boxing a combat sport. I don't know what we called it, but, from your perspective, it is now. So why is MMA thriving while boxing, some would say, is dying?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would say that boxing is dying. I mean, I think we've seen some pretty great fights recently. I think that boxing only has a few stars, and I think that MMA is making stars, and making stars at kind of a furious pace. And I think that the combination of skills that guys bring into the cage is what young guys want to see. It's what they trained on, So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and bring their wrestling background into it. It's not just a single sport. It's a combination of sports, and that's what young guys want to see. So I think both live very successfully. You're seeing boxing do a little bit of a comeback, but, you need lots of fighters to make a sport successful.
That's an incredibly political answer, but the bottom line is you have 10 seconds for an elevator speech to an advertiser of why MMA versus boxing. Go.
It's the sport for 18 to 34-year-old guys. It's the sport of the future. It's the sport, that we know that every movie publisher, every game publisher, anybody that wants to reach a young male is going to go for MMA.
You're the #2 series in the world. What's your business plan for becoming #1?
It's a real sport formula. It's something Kevin and I have talked about for years. It's all objective at Bellator. There's no matchmaking. There's no guy in a shiny suit sitting behind a desk deciding who fights who for what and when here. It's just like March Madness for MMA.
Does Don King have a shiny suit?
No comment. But it's all objective. It's real sports competition. It's what you and me have watched since we were little kids. You start out with a big group, and at the end, depending on who wins, you crown a champion. And all that matters is when that cage door shuts, who wins the fight. That's what we as sports fans are conditioned to watch and to track, and that's how we do it.
A lot of commissioners, CEOs talk about how important it is to cultivate their TV partner. Why does this partnership work?
It's a very different kind of partnership than we had with our former partners because Viacom is a majority owner in Bellator, which is a good thing. We see it very much alike. We have a lot of respect for each other, but we're also able to go out as one entity now and sell. So, there's no one beer on the mat and another beer in the movie and another beer in the pay-per-view. It's all one sale, all one time. So I think it works really well.
Finally, 5 years from now, where is the business of this sport?
It's the fastest growing sport on earth right now, and with television distribution partnerships like we have with Viacom on Spike, the future is really unlimited. I mean, it's that super consumer. The demographic that watches it is going to grow with it. We're going to capture that young demo. It's really unlimited. It could take over great spots in the overall sports world.
MMA is now legal in 46 states, plus Alaska, which has no athletic commission to oversee sports. New York, Connecticut, and Montana still don't sanction live martial arts events. Coming up, baseball continues to battle the shadow of the steroid era as Hall of Fame voters turn thumbs down on a group headlined by Barry Bonds. What do Barry's former employers think about his candidacy? Interesting reaction up next on Sportfolio. Get Sportfolio wherever you go on the Bloomberg TV Plus app for iPad. decade ago, 762 home runs and 7 MVP awards would have ensured first ballot election to the Baseball Hall of Fame. But because of steroid suspicions, those numbers didn't get Barry Bonds a ticket to Cooperstown. Few are surprised, but is anyone really angry? Recently, Deirdre Bolton, the Bloomberg TV's Money Move, sat down with San Francisco Giants CEO Larry Baer, and among other topics, they discussed Bonds, who had his greatest seasons in a Giants uniform. The Giants would likely benefit financially if Bonds became a Hall of Famer, so would Baer endorse his induction?
He's on the Hall of Fame ballot for the first time this year. Should he get in?
You know, that's a tough one in the sense that, number one, we don't get a vote. San Francisco Giants don't get a vote, nor do any other team, nor does the commissioner's office or anybody else. It's the baseball writers. They're going to opine. They have a set of criteria. So we're just going to leave it to the writers to make that judgment. I think that you have to look at the balance of the entire longevity of his career, the entire from day one through when he retired, and make that judgment. And we'll live with that judgment, and Barry will live with that judgment as well. They'll have to.
If you did have a vote, what would it be?
Well, we've seen Barry through a lot of iterations, and did he have a Hall of Fame career? I think that if you look statistically, you look at that, I think that what you have to do, Deirdre, is come up with a rubric for this era. And what is that rubric? And so I'm going to dodge the question by saying what should the criteria be in this era of the last decade or two, and then make your decision, because you could also go in a direction where nobody gets in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Very few.
The Giants never won a World Series during Bonds' 15 seasons, but they've won 2 in 5 years since he retired. Next week on the show, we'll discuss the financial impact of Hall of Fame snubs with longtime Bay Area sports executive Andy Dolich. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Sportfolio. Our thanks to Joe Bailey, Kevin Kay, Bjorn Rebney, Tom Laidlaw, and Larry Baer for joining us. And thank you for watching. You can watch more of Deirdre Bolton's interview with Larry Baer and more Sportfolio video on Bloomberg.com. I'm Rick Horrow. See you next time.